Welcome to Weekly Pulse. This week we bring you a special edition at a historic moment in time for the sports world. Prompted by the shooting of Jacob Blake by police in Kenosha, Wisconsin, teams across the NBA, WNBA, and MLB are boycotting games. Stars like LeBron James are elevating their voices at the center of a national conversation about race and social justice in America. While NBA teams have agreed to continue play in Orlando, an important question still stands. Will sports in America ever be the same after this strong display of leadership? Joining me on this week's show for a roundtable discussion are NBA reporters Mark Medina and Jeff Zillgitt, NFL columnist Jarrett Bell, and national columnist Nancy Armour. So the first question, topic of discussion we want to talk about is how we got here. So we start with Jeff. You've covered the league for a while now. Have you ever seen a day like this? Just take us through how the day unfolded from your perspective.
Well, this is certainly an unprecedented day in NBA history and even sports history. Once the idea of a boycott is out there, it's hard to put that back in the bag. And then we saw, obviously, what transpired on Wednesday with the Milwaukee Bucks deciding not to play. And you mentioned Kenosha, Wisconsin, just right down the road, about 40 miles from Milwaukee. And so that really is in the players' backyard. It really hit home.
I was proud as a Milwaukee native that it was Milwaukee teams taking the lead on this. And you know, to echo what Jeff said, this is personal for the Bucks. It's not just that Kenosha is, you know, a little bit further away than a Milwaukee suburb. The Bucks have experience with this. Sterling Brown, who is still with the team, in 2018 was racially profiled by Milwaukee police. He was tased. He was beaten up. A Milwaukee police officer ended up getting fired for making fun of the incident on social media. In 2015, John Henson, who had just signed a monster contract with the Bucks, went into a jewelry store and had one of the employees call 911 on him. So for the Bucks, this is something that they live it every single day. Their ownership has been outspoken in calling out Milwaukee for its segregation. You know, I love my hometown, but it is one of, if not the most segregated city in the country. Milwaukee also has a long history of protest, whether it's housing protests, social justice movements. You know, this is not unique to the city, or I should say it's not new to the city. So it was kind of a cool thing to see Milwaukee step up for an issue as important as this.
And for Jarrett, this week marks 4 years since Kaepernick took a knee, and you've been at the forefront of covering Kaepernick's initial protest 4 years ago, and you've seen us go from athletes taking a knee to them not even taking the field. I want to know for you, what does this elevation and demonstrations mean for you?
Yeah, I think it's a realization for the people in the sports industry who have tried to do things. And that's not just NFL, obviously, because we're talking about the NBA, Major League Baseball, et cetera. But there has to be such frustration to have had this movement now carry on for 4 years at least, and for things to still happen. So when you talk about raising awareness, which was the big thing that Colin Kaepernick, you know, said as he launched his movement, and others have, you know, joined in. We want people to be aware of these issues. Where people are aware now, yet you still have a Jacob Blake that happened on Sunday in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And so I know that level of frustration is there, and it's really not going to go away. Now, we're talking about it in a sports context, obviously, but I mean, it exists in our society overall in terms of where do we go from here? What do we do? How does this change? When does it end? What has to happen? And I don't know if I have all the answers to that, except to say, when you put it in the context of what happened with Colin Kaepernick 4 years ago, we still have so far to go. And I think the sports people are just feeling more and more empowered to use their platform as best as possible.
Going back to Nancy, and of course everyone can chime in if afterwards. While NBA players were in unison and the Brewers and the Mariners took a stand, you see other MLB teams in the NHL deciding to, you know, go ahead and play. What was your reaction to those who decided to keep playing?
But I think every team is going to have to really kind of look at themselves and say, what side of history do we want to be on? Where, when we look back at this in 20, 30, 40 years, what do we want to remember about what we did? And I think that's the thing that every team in every sport is really going to have to take a hard look at themselves and answer that question and answer it honestly.
And Jeff, was it universal from what you heard for NBA players? Is that what they wanted to do? Was this decided?
There certainly is a group of players who have had enough of being in the bubble and not being able to do things on the outside when it comes to some of these social justice issues. But there is also a group of players who feel that being in the bubble still gives them an opportunity to have a platform. I know they have their own social media channels, but they also realize the power that having a microphone and a camera in front of them and having their message transmitted, not only throughout the United States, but the world as well. And they need to come to a conclusion on what they would like to do as sort of a unified front. I certainly can see both sides. And I think the one thing I'd just like to point out quickly is that players do lots in their community, whether it's a LeBron James or Russell Westbrook, Steph Curry, you can go down the line. They've really invested financial and time into their communities. But what they're running into a roadblock is they can't enact some of this change that happens at legislative and government levels. And they're relying on people who have even deeper pockets than them, the owners, the corporations they have business dealings with, to put pressure on communities and cities and government officials to see the change that they would like. And that's really what we're starting to see right here. You can provide all the backpacks, school meals, even in LeBron James's case, a school, but that's not impacting the kind of change from the government level that they would like to see. And that's really what I think they're aiming for right here in boycotting games. And maybe they can get owners a little bit more behind them to enact that kind of change.
When we return, we continue our roundtable discussion and break down what all of this means for sports and activism in America. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Weekly Pulse. We now continue our roundtable conversation on the current state of sports in America. USA Today Sports' Mark Medina joins a conversation from the NBA bubble in Orlando to tell us what it was like to be on hand when the Milwaukee Bucks decided to boycott. So Mark, I'll start with you since you are there in Orlando, in the bubble, and are there any new updates with what's going on?
As a lot with everything in this world, the devil's going to be in the details. I know there was some initial confusion over why the Clippers and the Lakers in particular voted against resuming the season, more out of concern of not just the financial component and the league setup, but the idea that the owners and the league itself had been very supportive with making sure that everyone's safe on campus and that they were empowering all the players to do various causes to address systemic racism beyond the national anthem, beyond Black Lives Matter on the court, beyond messages on the jersey. The league had worked with the players union where they're going to be giving $300 million in the next 30 years to a new foundation that's aimed to form Black businesses. But I think from the players' end, where the frustration is where's the next step? Can they commit even more resources? To Nancy's point, can they, do some maneuvering behind the scenes to pressure state legislatures and the national government to enact change? But can the owners show enough commitment that they're going beyond just the public relations gestures and some, nice one-off financial contributions? Is it going to be a long-lasting sort of commitment that they'll show?
What's the league's perspective on this? It was clear this was initially driven by the players, but what are the conversations taking place right now with league officials from what you both have heard?
Real quick is that the NBA at the league office, they want to finish the season. Yeah. But at the same token, they also understand where the players are coming from. They understand their frustration, their anger, their sadness. And, as JB was talking about, there are a lot of ramifications here, and including for the players. There's a financial cost at this, and so not only for the players but for the NBA, and there's a trickle down effect to all NBA employees, and so there is lots to consider. Obviously from the players' perspective, but the NBA is trying to walk through these issues as well. But they fully understand where the players stand. Adam Silver, I don't even know if we've mentioned Adam's name quite yet, but since Adam has become commissioner, he has developed and crafted a fantastic relationship with the players. And we've seen the fruits of that relationship in a variety of ways, whether it's the aforementioned Donald Sterling case, whether it's getting a collective bargaining agreement settled, or whether it's this restart that has, ultimately been very beneficial in terms of protecting players from COVID-19, is that Adam has that relationship with the players. The players understand that. And so, Adam himself has, deep empathy for what the players are going through. And ultimately, they're not going to try to force the players to do one thing or the other, but while recognizing the NBA does want them to play.
Roger Goodell, right? You can make the contrast. Adam Silver and the NBA has been so far ahead when it comes to moving together with ownership, the league, the players, and in the NFL, it's just the opposite. So Roger Goodell has, spewed this narrative in recent weeks about we didn't listen to Colin Kaepernick. Well, guess what? NFL owners, Goodell, union leadership, players, they sat in a boardroom at NFL headquarters in 2017. And after that meeting, the Players Coalition was formulated. The NFL owners committed $89 million to social justice initiatives. So to come back now after George Floyd and after star NFL players, and that's another thing we could talk about, the involvement of some of them, to come back and kind of insist that, we didn't listen to Colin Kaepernick. Well, that is really insulting to my intelligence. And I know Nancy wrote about it recently where Goodell and the NFL, even if Roger Goodell in his heart of hearts wants to support players, he's also a representative of the owners. And that's the big difference with him and Adam Silver, because sometimes as a commissioner, you have to put the owners in check and you have to really sway their thinking on certain issues. And that's where, Goodell has frankly failed in this situation. But maybe there's hope, because a lot of times the NFL tries to fall on the side of where the popular opinion is. And when you look at society and you look at all of the corporations who have stepped up, made statements, committed things in the wake of the George Floyd situation, the NFL has to kind of get on board or really look even worse than it has. But I think Adam Silver just strikes me as a guy who has genuinely tried to deal with these issues, whereas Goodell, it has almost always seemed like those calculated moves based on what's the business interests are and trying to protect the owners.
And Nancy, I want you to build a little bit off what JB just said. What do you need to see that tells you, okay, the NFL gets it now?
Well, I think you need to see owners get engaged. One of the things that has been striking is that over the last three and a half months, we've seen plenty of NFL players speak up. Some of the star players, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. We also see Joey Burrow, the #1 draft pick, who's a white athlete who is not afraid to speak out, not afraid to call people out. He did it again this morning. Baker Mayfield. We're seeing coaches get involved. The people who've been silent are the owners, except for Jerry Jones, who says he's still looking for a compromise on player protests, which, get out of here with that. But I think these owners are going to have to start getting involved. And if they don't look and see what's going on with the NBA and think, spin it forward for a month and realize that the same thing could be happening to their games and their season on 3 different networks or 4 different networks, then they're deluding themselves, because this train has left the station and they can either fake that they're on the right side of history, or they can get run over. And to me, that it's as simple as that. One other thing too, and JB had brought this up before about the legislative issues. We've seen the impact that NFL owners can have. In Massachusetts, several of the Patriots had gotten together to lobby for a juvenile justice bill. They asked the Krafts, Jonathan Kraft and Robert Kraft, the owners of the team, if they would help out. And Jonathan Kraft did. He wrote letters, he made phone calls. Lo and behold, what legislation passed? The juvenile justice package. So NFL owners have the clout to get things done. They have the money, they have the connections. And if they don't start using them, you know, there are going to be consequences.
Welcome back to Weekly Pulse. Before we continue our roundtable discussion, it's important to recognize the events that ultimately led to the Milwaukee Bucks boycotting in Orlando.
All you hear is Donald Trump and all of them talking about fear. We're the ones getting killed. We're the ones getting shot. We're the ones that we're denied to live in certain communities. We've been hung, we've been shot. And all you do is keep hearing about fear. It's amazing to me why we keep loving this country and this country does not love us back. And it's really so sad.
As a community, we really want change. And it doesn't not only just end in November, but it starts there. And but we got to continue to still keep our foot on the pedal then. Even if we get what we want, we still need more. What are we getting? Because right now of what's going on it's just not okay. And but I hope I can continue to uplift my community, uplift communities all over America, uplift the Black community. Like I said, that's part of the reason why I started More Than a Vote, to, you know, just to get people to understand how important our voices are.
I can tell you it's on our players' mind, it's on our coaches' mind, it's on our staff's mind, it's on our organization's mind. And certainly a lot of respect for, we have a playoff game that's very important to us, but an incident like this is more important than anything we're doing in Orlando. And I think there was a lot of talk before we came here that we needed to continue this conversation. We needed to be better as a country and have no more of these incidents and understand that Black Lives Matter.
It's sad, you know, it's sad. Again, another one. This is America. Unless, you know, people decide to do the right thing. Hate to say it, man, this is America. We gotta stand by our own. We need our allies to stand with us. This is what's going on. It's happening, it's still happening, even after what happened with George Floyd.
It's so hard, like, to just keep watching it. That video, if you watch that video, you don't need to be Black to be outraged. You need to be American and outraged. And how dare the Republicans talk about fear? We're the ones that need to be scared. We're the ones having to talk to every Black child.
It hurts. And it's this, through the grace of God, that he's still living. Like 7 shots, close range, and he's still alive. That's through the grace of God right there. And my prayers goes out to that family and that community. But I got nothing nice to say about those cops at all.
When we return, we continue our roundtable discussion and broach the ultimate question: what now? Going back to the NFL, we mentioned earlier this week it marks the 4-year anniversary of Kaepernick taking a knee. Jarrett, I want to know, how have you seen the NFL stance on the situation with Kaepernick and what's going on evolve from that 4-year mark?
Well, I think what you've seen happen now is more and more people get involved. And even as Nancy alluded to earlier, you've had more and more white players speaking up, supporting their teammates. What we saw with the Detroit Lions this week and other teams today in terms of canceling practices to have those conversations behind the scenes. That's well and good. That's good internally, and you've got some collective sense of understanding between people who have to work together, and maybe they'll devise some strategies to where they can do some things together. We saw Tom Brady after the Ahmaud Arbery shooting sign a letter to Attorney General William Barr, like dozens of other players, but just to be willing to step forward and say, hey, we're in this too. I think that's one way this has evolved. And you've had, white players from the start. And I think Chris Long being one, he's not retired, but was very outspoken in the early days as, Colin Kaepernick was being so criticized. So you've got that element. You also have the element of what is going to happen with protests during the national anthem and beyond that, where NFL owners, as we've mentioned on this show, are really going to be pressured themselves to support their players better.
It's clear it's no longer just about protesting, but creating that tangible change. So I want to know, what change do you want to see sports bring about?
I think it needs, what I would like to see, and I think what it needs to be is legislative change. It is clear that we have issues with policing. There are too many Black men and women who have been killed by police in situations where we've seen white people walk away unscathed. That's unacceptable. It's horrific. And something has to be done, whether it's at the state level, at the national level. So that's what I'm hoping, that these protests, that it will get legislators to move in a way that they haven't been forced to move up until now, because that needs to happen.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think as you go even further with that, let's talk about some of the protections that are there when it comes to the accountability for police officers who have, committed heinous acts, and the desire of prosecutors to go after them. So something has to be changed in that part of the system as well. But, there are a lot of different angles to, social justice, and that needs to be one at the forefront, in addition to some of the others that have nothing to do with police, just in terms of how people are treated and the difference, the inequality in the system. And then, hey, we haven't even talked about other things socially. So there are a lot of things that can be done. Now, can you expect sports to solve all these issues? Of course it can't. But when I look at what's happening right now, I mean, it's historic.
How did this week's event show athletes' true roles in society, saying basically athletes aren't just athletes?
Well, I think, athletes have recognizing and are realizing the power of their platforms. And I think they're, for so many years, they were told that they don't have any say in anything, that they just need to shut up and dribble. And players now, whether it's because of social media, whether it's because of the money that's being made, they recognize that they have influence. And if they decide not to play, that is going to have ramifications. I'm not surprised that it started with the NBA. The NBA and in particular, the WNBA has been on this issue for years. But I think now what we're seeing is athletes in other sports going, you know what, there is something wrong here. We need to fix it. The power that we have is in calling attention to this and maybe holding feet to the fire. And that's exactly what they're doing. And, kudos to them for recognizing it and for using it.
Where we go as a nation from here remains to be seen, but we'll be right here with you along the way to break it all down.
Hey sports fans, if you want to see more videos like this, check out some of our other ones right here. And if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button and stick around for more from USA Today Sports.